thank you, Director Comey, for your excellent work and your great service to our country. Thank you to your family, and most especially to your wife, Patrice, who has done so much for the children of Connecticut and now for others around our country. I've just come from... Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that correction. I've just come from a hearing at the Armed Services Committee where Secretary Carter was testifying. And I want to first make the point that we often thank our men and women in uniform, which I do readily and repeatedly, and I do again now, but I also want to thank the very brave men and women who work under your command, who enforce our laws and help to keep us safe, along with all of our law enforcement men and women around the country, police, at every level, and are, in a sense, also at war. In fact, Secretary Carter said, and I'm quoting, talking about ISIL, "The reality is we are at war. That's how our troops feel about it, because they're taking the fight to ISIL every day, applying the might of the finest fighting force the world has ever known." Do you feel that we are at war also within our borders against forces of terror that are linked to those forces abroad that our men and women in uniform are fighting?
Very much, Senator. And our people feel that passionately. Our people are tired. I mean, we are working very, very hard. They're working very, very hard. But what motivates them is these people want to kill our people. I mean, we are at war with these people. And so stopping them is what is the reason we do this work.
And the President well identified this new phase that perhaps is an old phase in larger scale, the phase of ISIL and ISIS reaching outside the theaters where they have fought so far, reaching into this country. You've referred to crowdsourcing as the San Bernardino experience, and outsourcing that threat to new recruits, to homegrown radicals, may be part of the threat here. But you would agree that we face a war every bit as dire and dangerous here at home as we do abroad.
Yes, the threat, obviously, and the density of these savages is less here in the United States, but the nature of it is very similar.
And I know that you've responded about the importance of cooperation in terms of information and other kinds of assistance that is provided by members of the Muslim community. Just as cooperation and support is essential from nations that have a majority of Muslims abroad in our fight against ISIS and ISIL. They are our natural allies and friends and partners in this fight against extremist terrorism and violence abroad. And I want to ask you about some of the statements that are made about closing borders and about religious tests at our borders, other kinds of religious tests that, in my view, are unconstitutional, but also strike me as unwise because we need that cooperation. Are the statements themselves potentially inhibiting that kind of cooperation and support and help that we need?
Thank you, Senator. I don't want to comment on anybody's statements, but I can make, I think, the point that you're interested in. ISIL is trying to recruit in Muslim communities. They're trying to motivate people who may be of the Muslim faith who are unmoored in some way to become part of their poisonous endeavor. The people who so often tell us about people like that are other Muslims who help us. And so we've worked so hard over the last 15 years to build relationships of trust that allow us to find out who might be trouble and to stop it. That's in everybody's interest. And anything that gets in the way, that erodes that relationship of trust, is not a good thing.
And Muslims who live in our nation are fellow Americans, many of them equally interested in preventing threats and violence as anyone of any religion.
Our experience, what's wonderful about this country is we're incredibly diverse. They are part of that diverse polyglot, and they love our country, which is why they help us when there's a killer in their midst or someone on the path to being a killer in their midst. We have to continue this. As I said at the beginning, we're all in this together. We need each other.
Well, I applaud your very clear and emphatic, unequivocal statement about that point. I want to shift to another terrorist act, at least one that strikes terror, not of the same motivation, but involving the apparent racist-motivated violence in Charleston. The FBI background system known as NICS was applied in the case of Dylan Roof's purchase, but only too late to prevent him from buying a gun. The 72-hour loophole that I have tried to close enabled him to walk away with a gun that he sought to purchase. Thanks to that loophole, after the 72-hour period, since the background check was not completed, but would have precluded him from buying a gun, he was enabled to have that firearm. Gun retailers have sold 15,729 guns in the last 5 years to individuals who were not legally allowed to purchase them. And about 5 months ago, I think, you commissioned a study that was to last 30 days to examine how Dylan Roof was able to buy that gun. I think that report would help us in Congress to understand what went wrong and how to fix it, and most especially if the 72-hour loophole enabled him to buy that gun, as appears to be from the facts that we have been told so far. The report would be very helpful. So my question is, can you update us as to the status of that report?
Certainly, Senator, and we'd be happy to get you a detailed briefing on it because the work was done, as I asked, in 30 days. And it did two things. It confirmed the facts as we understood them close to the murders in Charleston, that there was a mistake made by our processing clerks that was compounded by a mistake in the records of the South Carolina jurisdiction where he would have been, where the prohibitor came from. And so that confirmed what we knew. What it most importantly told us is, how can we get better? The law is what the law is. We have 3 days to process these thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And so we're working on a number of things to get better. One, to improve the records that are put in by state and locals, to improve our technology, and to surge resources. The number of gun purchases continues to climb. It's climbed dramatically in the last week. We got to make sure we have enough folks. If all we have is 3 days, we got to make sure we have enough folks to do that. And so those are the 3 buckets: better records, better technology, and more importantly, more human beings on the phones to process them more quickly.
So resources are really important. Resources in technology, resources in people, and resources in records that you depend on because many of them come from state and local authorities as well.
Correct.
My time has expired. This whole area is tremendously important. I want to thank you for being here today. And just to clarify, racial and religious supremacists often use terrorist-type tactics, even though we would not call them terrorists today. But I appreciate the attention that you're giving to the potentially white supremacist-motivated acts of violence in that church in Charleston. Thank you.